So I'd like to call this evening's meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals to order. We're still waiting for Mr. Rogers to arrive, so we will review minutes, get some of that sort of routine business taken care of. So at this time, we'll review meeting minutes from Thursday, January 9th. Everyone should have those in their packet.
I don't have January 9th. I have August.
No, those are the executive session ones, that regular ones.
So much paper.
I know,
All right, thank you.
you're very welcome.
Oh, and you gave me two of them.
Yeah, I think I'd already looked at these. I don't have any changes. Anyone else have any comments or thoughts on these? Are you still looking at them? Or when someone feels so motivated, I'll entertain a motion to accept the meeting minutes of January 9th, 2020
So moved.
as submitted. Motion made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And I think the only other ones we have are executive session minutes, right?
Correct.
All right, so those will need to wait till we get into executive session. Looks like we have some, all right. Most important order of business that I completely skipped over. I'd like to welcome our two new members to the Zoning Board of Appeals. Thank you very much both for volunteering. You'll, obviously you're alternates, so you initially be kind of doing some listening. But one thing that's very important to understand as an alternate, you can and should participate in all of our hearings and meetings as if you were full members. And if you just think about it from the point of view of, even if on a given night the full board is here and we're all prepared to vote on a hearing, it's possible that hearing could get continued to another evening. At which point maybe one of the sitting five is not available. At that point you would be appointed, and hopefully you paid attention the previous night and were prepared and ask questions, etc. So even though you may not be voting, please feel free to participate fully, ask questions, offer opinions, etc. And then as far as paperwork and whatnot, Katrina, have they been given
They've been everything?
the bylaw?
No, I've got to get that for them. I will get you the zoning bylaw book and everything else. I will get that done for you guys tomorrow.
Okay, so that sort of thing. Do you have a copy of that training book that everyone seems to have gotten a copy of mine? That Citizens Planning Training Collaborative book?
Oh, I think I have a copy of it. I can make a copy. I think it's in my book, so I
Yeah,
will make a copy and give
so
it to you.
make a copy of that. So that's a,
I don't think I have.
Yeah, you may not have gotten a copy of that. I'll make a copy. So gentlemen, do you want it, spiral bound or a 3-hole binder?
Anything.
What would you prefer?
3 old's fine. Let them be the case.
spiral or?
Yeah,
I would say
spiral's fine.
spiral.
too.
But it's fine.
Okay. Do you have one?
I don't think so.
You don't have a zoning bylaw book?
Can it? Oh, no, I think, what's the other book?
The one that Bill refers to, which is an excellent.
That's a different, that's a, all right.
That's the one I don't think I have.
Okay,
I
so-
have the bylaws.
This
Okay,
one.
Training one?
Yeah, I don't have this one.
all right, I'll make a copy of that too.
Yeah,
I have
so
that.
This actually, well, a couple of things. So the Citizens Planner Training Collaborative offers training on zoning sorts of issues, and we receive the notice of when they're offered. You can actually find them online. They tend to be pretty good. They also tend to not be offered in central Massachusetts. So
You have to travel.
you have to travel. Frequently they're far away, but they tend to be pretty good. This particular book on variances I find to be extremely helpful. Variances are really very, as I said, they're very difficult to grant variances. There's very strict requirements, and this kind of helps really explain, some of the various requirements that you need to meet a variance. So Katrina has it, you have this?
I believe so,
She's
yeah.
pretty sure she has it, she'll get your copy.
Katrina, copy me on that one too.
I thought I gave you guys all
I
copies of
don't, I don't
that.
remember that one
All right.
either.
I'd have to look in my.
Okay.
I remember the
I'll let you
spiral
know if
bound
I
one,
have
but
it.
I don't remember that either.
I think I have.
Read it, so.
I refer to that often, just about any time of variance, especially for variance, I'll refer to that and then, kinda use that as a guide.
I have one request of, do you have a nickname that we?
Seat.
Seath, I thought that when I said the welcome. I said, okay, I'll call you Seath until you tell me I
You got
should
it right.
use some other nickname. Thank you. How do you pronounce your first?
Seth Harriman?
Sita Raman.
Seath the Raman.
Yeah, if you say it slow, you get.
Yeah,
That's the trick.
Sita Raman, yeah.
Yeah, actually, it's phonetic if you say it slow, yeah. Yeah. And then the last name, the family name?
Guineas, and that's my dad's name.
Kenise.
Neeson, okay. Yep. Okay. All right, so anything else I'm forgetting for these guys?
I don't think so.
Bylaw,
Bylaws, that's my fault. I should have gotten that for them.
yep.
I'm sorry.
Okay. The training and the town will actually pay for the training if you find one that you wanna go to.
Yep.
And I guess that's it about that. All right, I think we have some bills here.
Oh, that, this,
Some guy named Dan Hill.
Yes. Because
We have to sit
Yeah.
down too.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not coming in for the long.
tonight?
Graves Engineering.
Yeah, it's all Grace and Dan Hill.
Who else do we pay?
That's all, that's the extent of my bills,
Yeah.
basically. Or,
Dan and Jeff.
or the T and G.
Yeah. So, I just signed this anyway, right?
Yep.
All right, so you need a couple other signatures.
Thursday and in the middle.
And then, where did you get that signature page? Was that in here somewhere? Do we have that signature page for the open meeting law?
Yeah, didn't I give you, should be the very last paper in your book.
Okay, so did everyone receive the email about the open meeting law?
Yeah.
And hopefully you've read it, and there's an opportunity right now in your packets to sign that you received a copy of that summary document, and you'll pay attention to it and do all the right things.
It's the, yeah, that's that one.
So,
You wanna sign them and give them to me, and then I'll turn them into the town clerk tomorrow.
or if you're not prepared to sign it right now, so employee at, what is it, zoning board of appeals? ZBA?
Katrina, I've done that already.
Okay, that's fine. Carl already did it too and gave it to Candy. That's absolutely fine.
Am I supposed to actually sign
We
this somewhere?
received it, we need to put the date you sent it to
Last
us,
page.
I'll fill the date in.
a couple days ago.
Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't look at it.
Yeah, there's no signature, are we supposed to sign it?
Yeah, I mean, there's no place actually to sign it. Just write my name.
Yep.
All right,
Okay,
no problem. Done.
this is better to do it this way than have
All right,
this,
this
whatever
folder
we
can
used
go
to always
back.
do.
Where'd my agenda go? Too bad the Elm Rock guys aren't here. Are they coming?
Yeah,
They're not out there, are they?
Steven said he was gonna be here right at 7, but maybe they decided to come later. I have no idea.
Okay, all right, doesn't matter. Mary Ann's here.
Yay, Mary.
The world is good now.
How could you forget us?
I was working from home, and I guess I'm less productive when I work from home.
Al, if you wanna take a look, these are the bills,
I don't
and
keep track of
Katrina
time too
gives
well.
them to them there. You don't have to look at each one, but she gives us the sheet that she has to turn in for that reimbursement. But if, if you wanna look at the bill, you can,
Yeah,
just to get an idea from
Okay.
the engineering, the lawyers that represent the board.
Oh, that's a drag.
So the next order of business would be an executive session for the purpose of discussing pending litigation. So at this time, I'd entertain a motion to enter into executive session for the purpose of discussing pending litigation with the intention to reconvene in open session afterwards.
So moved.
Second.
So motion made and seconded. Any discussion or comments? So this is a roll call vote. Mr. Waller?
Yes.
How do you vote? Yes. Mr. Yeomans?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers? Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. So we're in executive. We'll go in the other room. All right, we're now back into open session. So we, back in May, I guess, or sometime last year, we created a decision for Chapter 40B application for Prentice Place. That decision was appealed to the Housing Appeals Committee. Part of that process of that appeal is a remediation session. At that remediation session, we came up with a plan, a general agreement of how to resolve the appeal. And after many months of hard work, we have before us a plan for 40 units where we had approved 32 and the developer had asked for 48. We've got a plan for 40 units. We've got a plan that preserves some buffering along the Matthew Circle residences. We have a plan that includes gravity feed sewer. Those are some of the big items that were really important to the board. And we're at that point now where in executive session, as a board, we've agreed that we are happy with this decision and we'd like to, this plan, and we'd like to move forward with it. I believe the next step, and Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, would be a decision by the part of this board as to whether or not this is a substantial change or an insubstantial change. The significance of this decision is if we determine it to be a substantial change, we would need to advertise and notice, et cetera, and have a public hearing. So at this time, I'd entertain a motion to determine that the settlement plan dated, and I don't have my glasses on, so I know I'm gonna see it's November 22nd. Is that the date of the settlement plan?
No, it's
November
22nd. I think it was one.
I have a plan
November.
dated, bear with me, November 22nd, 2019, and last revised, I'm sorry, January 16th, 20. I gave you the wrong date in the other room.
Oh, okay. So, I entertain a motion that the zoning board of appeals determine that the settlement plan dated November 22nd, last revised January 16th, 2020, is an insubstantial change.
So moved.
Second.
So motion made and seconded. So, I'll just offer that, in my opinion, it's not, a substantial change. It's essentially less intense or less dense than the, proposal by the developer. It is more dense than what we had, agreed to, or we had, provided a permit for. But in my opinion, we're still pretty consistent with everything that we talked about and discussed with the neighbors, et cetera. I don't think this is a substantial change. Any other thoughts or comments? Then hearing none, we'll vote. And again, this should be done on a roll call vote. Mr. Waller?
Yes.
Mr. Yeomans?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. So we've determined this to be an insubstantial change. So I believe the next step is a discussion of the modification decision. And I think at this point, I might turn it over to Dan to kind of lead us through what we need to talk about here.
Sure. So, this is a draft modification decision. This will substitute for the comprehensive permit decision that we issued a year ago. This, this decision has been vetted by the applicant and his engineer and his lawyer. There is agreement on, I'd say, 95% of the substance of this decision. There's a few open issues that need to be discussed tonight. There may be some differences between the board and the applicant on a few issues. So I think we should just go through it and hit the highlights. If you'd like, I can just kind of start from the top and go through it. I'm not going to read every section, but
No,
where
I think we just want to, what we need to talk about.
yeah, where there's an issue, I'll raise it. If I went past something you want to talk about, just interrupt me. So the findings of fact, that's all brand new. So printout you have is a little bit different from mine. I had the comments on the side, so my page numbers are different, but, so findings of fact, that's Roman numeral 4,
It's on our page 3.
and that goes all the way through, my page 6, but your page,
3.
Goes to page 6.
5.
Goes to 5, top of page 6.
yeah. So we'll plug in the architectural plan references, the landscape plan, so there is, am I correct, there's not gonna be a landscape plan at this point, we're gonna defer that.
Right, we're comfortable with a condition that's already in here that we still are subject to your, your reviewing, and we'll do that, because we know the parameters, and we'll do it as part of the final plans that will be reviewed.
Okay.
All right, so paragraph 12 will just reference, A and B, and I'll plug in the reference to the architectural plan, I just wanna make sure we have the right one, but it's the July 2019.
Yeah, you can copy and paste, and you and I can talk tomorrow whenever from the settlement agreement draft that listed them all.
Yeah, okay. All right, and then, so the conditions, then start, most of section A is boilerplate that was there before. Section A2, the approved plans shall incorporate the changes recommended by the zoning board's consulting engineer to my left. And D, I just want to make sure, Jeff, you're okay with the deletion of D. I think that condition goes away because the issue there has gone away.
The issue, in fact, went away with the revision of the buildings, the door locations, the walkway locations, and the regrading of the site, yes.
Okay.
Because I got lost momentarily, maybe others did, maybe not, but we're talking about A2 and the strikeouts of letter D. Okay. All right, yep,
So
good.
that'll come out. And then E, Sotir had added the qualifier off-site stormwater collection inlets. Our original decision required, granite at all inlets, including on-site, so
Okay.
did you wanna,
Off-site, as long as the off-site have them, that's important, because that is the protocol of the town.
do you care if they're not granted on-site?
No, they do provide some hydraulic capacity, but as of my, review of the plans, not the settlement plans, but back before, there weren't flows to any of the catch basins high enough that warranted the extra capacity afforded by the granite inlets.
Okay. So that's that. G, that was fine, that change is, I think, fine with me.
Yes, I
Okay, you-
had no issue with that. And they still need to be addressed, that is correct. And, the applicant had, committed to do so, during peer review of the preliminary plans.
Okay, A11, that was blank, the number of bedrooms, that's 84 bedrooms?
Right, it's two times 40 is 80 in the four, guest.
Nope. Bedrooms.
No, this is bedrooms.
Bedrooms, not.
You've got some
That's,
three-bedroom units.
you
Oh,
have,
well, you know what, that's funny, later, I think that's the number of parking spaces. but
It
yes,
is.
that's the
Yeah.
in the bedroom.
That is correct.
A little slow in the uptake, but I remember the number.
there are 4 3-bedroom units, that's 12, and then you have 36 2-bedroom units, 72, and the 8, 70,
2 plus 12.
3 times 4 is 6, 12, yeah, we have
You were right.
I was right.
You're
yes.
right. Yeah.
All right, and so this issue goes also to A12. We had a condition that 10% of the units be one-bedroom studio apartments. And so you want that to be eliminated.
Yes,
Yeah,
I mean, we eliminated all the 1 bedrooms in order to keep the total number of bedrooms that we had on the previous plan. And that's where the design came out the way it did came out, with those 3 buildings all having, having 2-bedroom units, with the exception of the 4 3-bedroom units that the state had required us to put in there.
So that's not something we strictly talked about at mediation, but is that something that,
Trying to think of when it did come up. And if it didn't come up, it probably didn't come up in mediation, but it came up, I think, in the first time you came back with a plan. And I'm okay with it. I've learned recently that actually one-bedroom units, there is quite a demand in town for, and it is something maybe we need to pay attention in the future to, but at this point for this project, I think it's water over the dam, and, I'm okay with it.
All right, moving right along. I'm skipping over the rest of section B. Now we're on to section C. All of this is the same as what was there before. C20, I think, is the same. C21 was the same. C23, we had required that any retaining walls that are visible from the street be made out of fieldstone for aesthetic reasons. And Sotir is asking that be stricken. He wants the flexibility of using alternative materials.
Yeah, and let me just show the board members what I had built for us.
I think the language as proposed is fine, so it says we want fieldstone, but the applicant may propose alternatives. Quite frankly, just looking at this looks like something that would be acceptable. But I think just leaving the option for us to review this at a later point.
You're gonna be looking at the landscape plan anyway,
Yeah,
so that would be the time where they could propose
Yeah.
the wall material.
Yep.
Fieldstone, but you can ask them to prove something else.
Okay.
Would they have to come before us? No.
yeah, no, the applicant may propose an alternative wall material in its landscape plan submission
Because you're gonna be submitting a
for the
landscape
board's
plan.
consideration.
Correct.
Adding that.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have to come.
But in general, it'd be good if I can have the board say if it's
This looks like
up here.
I think this generally looks like something that would be okay.
Yeah.
I think what we don't want is some blank concrete wall.
Yeah, no, I hear you. Neither do I.
Yeah, so I think generally this would be okay.
Okay.
And
Seems like it, looking at, just, 8.5 by 11 glossy here, looks good.
Yeah, where are the samples? He said to bring samples.
You should have constructed one.
you're
here.
seeing it.
Yeah, model.
It's gonna be concrete with those pictures posted.
It looks pretty fancy.
What will be the height of the wall there that you're proposing?
I think it's ranges at the highest point with the detention basin, 6 to 8 feet.
That's fine. No, I appreciate the way Dan amended that. That's fine.
Actually, it may actually be less so tier. I've got a top of wall of, I think, 394.5, and I have a 390 contour near the bottom of the wall, so it might only be about 4.5 feet high,
That's probably,
which would be less imposing and,
yeah, than
yep,
a 6 or 8.
So 6 might be with the footing, and you probably gonna go.
yep. It might have been
So that
taller
wall
earlier
cross.
on. Yep.
Okay?
Okay, let's see, D3, limit of work, and D4, they kind of go together. So, the way I landed here with Peter on the drafting is that, they're gonna delineate a limit of work on the revised plans. And by the way, the framework is that after tonight, they're gonna go back, produce a revised set of plans, engineered plans, and on those plans, there'll be things that incorporate these conditions, including this, which requires them to delineate a limit of work, meaning that all their earth disturbance will happen within those limits. And it has to be at least 15 feet setback from property lines. And so that's what D3 incorporates. If there's any accidental or even intentional tree destruction within that 15 feet or more, that the trees would be replaced at a 2-to-1 ratio. And then D4 speaks to the open space buffer. This is the 30-foot strip. So this would incorporate the first 15 feet, but then another 15 feet, and that's the 30-foot strip that you see on the plans that runs along the north and west boundary. The applicant shall add vegetation containing at least a row of evergreen trees 6 to 8 feet tall to provide a solid screen between the project and Matthews Circle, Butters, and 36 Elm Street. There's not gonna be evergreen trees on the north side because that's where the wetland is. I mean, he can get permission to do that if he wants, but that's not something we required.
So, inclusion of the southern, 15-foot on the southern property boundary, so what is the southern property boundary? Is it everything along, Elm and Bradish's? Is it just along the Elm properties? And then how do we build a sewer line through that limit of work area? Cause that certainly is part of it.
Right. I meant, my intent was just Elm, not Bradish.
Okay,
And obviously the sewer line would have to be an exception to this.
I mean, do we need language in there for that, or,
We could,
you know, I'm just.
except as shown in the plans.
All right, so the building inspector gets this now and goes out there and realizes that there's been construction in that area because they had to put the sewer line through there. You know, I don't know, maybe there should be some exception language there.
Right.
And maybe, maybe, I don't know if you need to clarify, it seems like Bradish is the eastern boundary. So maybe you don't need to clarify what's southern and what's eastern, but,
Yeah,
Okay.
I'll put in parentheses Elm Street,
yeah,
and then I'll put in except for utility installation as shown on the plan.
yeah, okay, all right.
Yep.
I just want to avoid
No, that's a good catch, thank you.
Bob coming in here.
Yep.
All right.
I have a question.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Yeomans.
Regarding the trees, is there any stipulation relative to the proper planting? I see it's, by landscape professionals, et cetera. One of the concerns I have, and we've got a great example of trees that were planted and they're dead, is in front of the high school. Those evergreens that were planted there, they died shortly after they were put in the ground because they were never watered. Is there any opportunity to put in and I know it's in your best interest too that the trees live. And I know, you can't be out there watering them as I would do in my yard, but there are devices today that, the bag devices in a young tree, and you periodically fill those babies up with water. And, that's the only concern I have. In other words, planting the evergreen trees in this 30-foot buffer, at least a row of evergreen trees, you can plant them at the appropriate time, I guess. We could leave that up to you to hope that they're gonna survive.
I think that issue is addressed because I have a well on site, and I was intending to use the well on site for irrigation purposes.
Okay,
I think most of those areas will probably have water to water them. But if they die, I'll replace it. I mean,
Yeah,
The
yeah.
intent is to make the.
no, I mean, the hope is that they, you put them in and you take good care of them
Yeah.
and they live and they prosper and,
I don't want to pay more.
and
money to
everybody's happy,
replace
but
them.
I know every time I drive by that high school, I said, Jesus.
Should you include language
So-
like planted and maintained?
Well, D8 addresses this, maybe not as far as you wanted to, but the landscape plan that gets submitted requires surety and a plan of maintenance for the first 2 years of these trees.
Okay. Okay, for maintaining within the
The
first
2
years.
years, yeah.
Okay,
I mean, we could add trees shall be replaced.
well,
Dying or dead.
just a closing note, with that well, giving you, basically free water, you could have a drip line going down, 2 drip lines going down that 30-foot buffer and probably solve all your needs. And I just know that, that if they're not watered,
Yep.
and you get some dry spell, if you plant them in September, and then you winter over, and then in the spring, you get a pretty good time. But if you plant them in the spring for the summer, you get a dry summer, you got some problems.
And Dan,
That addresses it there.
part of the submission standards or requirements include an adequate plan for replacing as necessary
Yep,
plantings.
okay.
So you'll see the plan.
Oh,
and if-
where is that?
It's in subsection B in the middle, on minus the top of page 18. The paragraph is all about this landscaping plan. Roughly in the middle,
Oh.
it says 2 years of plantings on the site. The letter B, an adequate plan for replacing is necessary.
Okay.
So you covered it.
Yeah, as long as we, watch that when it comes into us. We'll make sure we have a plan that says these trees shall be replaced if they're died or if they're dead or diseased.
Did you say there's surety described somewhere for the landscape? Did I hear you say that, or did I?
Yeah, C, evidence of a performance bond sufficient to cover the cost of maintenance and restoration.
Wait, see where?
D8,
D8.
D8C.
D8C
On page 17.
17.
Oh, okay, there it is. But I'd almost gotten to that point. Okay. All right, thank you.
I have a question. I'm looking at the map. Building 1, the front left, I feel it's kind of close to the road. Will we have a setback there, like 15 feet setback there?
Well, it is what it is at this point. If that is, I don't think that's within the required setback for the building envelope. But if it is, then, he'd probably ask for a waiver of that requirement that we've more than likely granted.
And I am seeing a dashed line, which to me looks like it represents the building setback line. And the building does not encroach within the required yard, if that is in fact the setback line. It gets close to it, Heath, very close to it, but I think it's compliant. And they have to comply unless they get granted a waiver.
Yep.
All right. D10. So we took out that last sentence, which was the center island of the parking area was not going to be used for snow storage. We required the center island to be densely filled with trees and shrubs. That island is now gone with the revised parking lot design. So just want to flag that. Now we're moving to E. E2, I know the applicant was concerned about getting hit for a big lump sum of legal fees to review the regulatory agreement and the affordable housing restrictions. I explained that our practice has always been, I review typically those documents as they come in. It generally is less than an hour unless there's issues, in which case it might take longer, but this is pretty much a pro forma type of thing, so.
And Sotir, I did discuss it. I was the one who raised it. It's a legalistic point. And Sotir, I believe, is satisfied with keeping it in.
Okay.
So.
Great.
He wants brownie points for doing so.
Good job.
Duly noted.
Really noted.
All right, E8, now we're talking about parking access. This language was in the original permit that we required that there be at least one reserved parking space per unit. I don't remember how we landed on that point.
Well, I think it started with the concern about this is before we were at 2 per unit, and the concern was that, with so few parking spaces, that somebody comes home from work and has no place to park and they end up in Nelson Park. Now that we're up to the 2 per, maybe it's not as much of a problem. I guess, Sotir, you'd rather not have your tenants have assigned spots?
Actually, what I didn't want to do is I don't want to have a vacant unit and not be able to use their parking space because they're allocated to that specific unit. So as long as they're not reserved, so I don't have a problem in doing that, in giving people at least a space,
And we could, I'm not sure it merits being added as a requirement, but it's probably okay. I think your intent is to have some type of sticker system, so at least for your monitoring, in case there are scofflaws or something like that, at least you'll know that people with the stickers are entitled to park somewhere there, so it's gonna be more controllable.
But I guess the concern is for, I work late, so I get home at, 10 o'clock at night maybe. We'll have a parking spot.
Will there be any handicap parking?
Yeah, there's some that's required by the code, so
I think assigning a space to a unit is not a bad idea. But just one, and then leave the rest of it open for people to use whenever they have guests coming over or whatever.
Right.
Because they're not all gonna be occupied all at the same time. There are people that work at nighttime, for example.
Yeah.
You don't wanna have a space that's vacant because it's allocated to an individual. And that's the drawback about having to reserve a unit, because if I'm working at night and somebody works during the day and I got people coming in, if you reserve it, it's not being used. So I prefer not to have any reserved ones and control them by having the application require people to give you your license plate, and then I can monitor and make sure whose car it belongs to who. Or give them stickers that says that they're eligible to use the parking space, but reserving it, I think it's a little too confined and may limit the ability to have a full use of the entire parking area.
I think the board's objective is served by saying there has to be at least one parking space per unit.
Yeah.
He can figure out how he wants to regulate that, but at least now, what you described, Bill, is not gonna happen, because if a bunch of visitors are parking in the lot and you as the actual tenant can't find a space, then that violates this condition. So if that becomes a recurring problem in this project, then the board and the town has something that it can use to enforce that.
Yes.
So,
And actually, I mean, we're up to 2 per unit. To be honest, I think we're good. I think we're good.
all right, so we're okay striking the word reserved, right?
I am.
Why are we saying at least one when it's 2?
Well, reserves, meaning.
Well, we're taking reserved out.
As I see it, the discussion we're having was balancing letting the parking demands fend for themselves by way of not assigning any parking spots whatsoever, first come, first serve. Dwelling units that don't have a high parking demand because only one individual lives there, by not assigning 2 parking spaces, you're not leaving one that never gets used. Assigning 1 means that every dwelling unit has at least 1 parking spot, I would assume in closer proximity compared to the others, which is good, especially for those that work late. And then let the parking demands fend for themselves for the remaining 44 spaces.
Okay.
There's kind of a
I
balance.
see.
And we,
But I think that's-
calculated
It's 1, yeah,
2 per unit, but
But-
we didn't necessarily say it.
There's
Every
gonna be
unit
2
gets 2.
cars too. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
In 98, that should just end with a period and strike that whole.
Yeah, like there should be no
No,
reserve.
with at least one.
That's
No,
right.
there should be at least 1 parking
That's
space
why it's
per
marked
unit.
out. One
Well,
parking space.
we already know that there has to be at least 2.
But they're not per unit. And so the point is
It's
that,
just available, 84
just making sure there's at
available.
least one car per household can at least find a space to park at night. I think that's what this accomplishes by taking out the reserve, by keeping the rest of it in.
Okay.
Can I make a suggestion? If you want to have that assigned 1 parking space per dwelling unit, change the word reserved to assigned, because I'm getting tripped up on the reserve.
But the point is that it's not, we don't want to assign a specific physical space.
Oh, okay.
We want to be floating.
Okay.
In a way, the concept is that
It's a sticker.
we will have, to fulfill this as well as what you do anyway, but the lease will say you're entitled to 1 space. We're not assigning you a specific space, but your lease, so that if somebody, with that, probably unlikely, but if, who knows what the reason is, but if on a repeated basis, a tenant says, I'm not getting a space, it's always full, it'll be a violation of the landlord under the lease. So,
And of the permit.
and of the permit, right, understood. But in terms of direct relationship with the tenants, it would give, reciprocal, the tenant some teeth to make sure that he does the right thing. So,
Yeah, when we had a lot fewer spaces for the volume of units, for the 40 units, I was more concerned about this. I'm not as concerned now. I'm okay taking out reserved. I'm okay with what I think Bill said as far as ending the sentence before then, but it doesn't matter to me. I'm okay just taking out the word reserved, and
Reserved, yep.
if the applicant is happy with it, at that point, I'm
If
happy.
I may, Mr. Chairman, just from previous experience, you've got to have at least 1 reserved. Or you're gonna have the cops in there, it all depends on the tenants you're gonna have. And car parking is, especially in the winter, it's an issue. And
Well,
if
that
you have-
becomes,
you know
but
what
that
I'm saying?
becomes his problem
problem,
as,
right.
as a landlord, right? You know, if I'm renting and I can't get a spot,
He's calling him.
Well, you probably be calling 911, and then you're gonna be having repetitive. I'm just throwing it out there.
Yeah.
So,
Are you gonna have an on-site property manager?
On-site property manager, maybe during the days, because we are gonna have an office, leasing office, so somebody will be working there. Reserved, assigned to me is the same thing. What I don't wanna see is spaces left open because they have been assigned to an individual.
Like number.
Like a number, for example. If we have 2 parking spaces and we have 40 units, I am the one who's gonna have to manage, when I lease the unit, what I have to deal with. So if I have one person with one car renting one of the units there, I don't wanna commit it because they may be leaving during the other hours where other people are staying. So it puts limitations on the use of the parking space, in my opinion.
yeah, I'm just throwing it out as a suggestion, that's all.
I'm okay with the language, that's proposed here, strike the word reserved, I'm okay with that.
Okay.
You know, as a tenant, though, personally, I would want a reserved spot, but that's up to you.
And that I can do. It depends on when actually they're, well.
Yeah.
I
That's
know
your
what you're
decision,
saying.
it's your property,
Yes.
it's your decision.
Yep.
All right,
By the way, Jeff, if you have any comments that, to jump in,
Okay.
as I'm going through it, 'cause I know you had some notes, but.
I have some notes, basically, notes say almost everything's good. I'm gonna throw something out about the parking that I don't think the board should impose, but just so to hear an idea for you, I don't know if it has merit or not. Perhaps there's 40 spaces allocated to sticker parking,
Okay,
and each dwelling unit gets a sticker with no number on it, so any of those 40 vehicles, one vehicle per dwelling unit, gets the use of the 40 preferred spaces, if you will.
okay.
However they see fit. I don't know if it would work for you, or just food for thought as you're putting your management plan together for this later.
Yeah, that was the thought that I expressed, that a sticker system will help really management. I don't know that it needs to be in here, but that, I think, is a good idea.
Yeah.
Mine is anecdotal for my other rental clients, but I think it does make
Okay.
sense.
Sure.
Would that be 260 square foot per parking? I mean, per parking space, I don't know. I read that somewhere, I read that in MFR, multiple family residential.
well, you know, I think Jeff has reviewed the size of the parking spaces, and
I think it's in our
Yes.
waiver section.
they're, I think they're appropriate.
And when we get to the waivers, I think that's addressed in the waivers. All right, so then F4, I had highlighted this just to make sure, I think, Jeff, that you are okay with the fact that there's a 20-foot wide aisle.
With the angled parking
With the
only,
angles.
that is correct, and I'm comfortable with that.
You're
Yep.
okay with that? Okay.
Yes, I am.
Because I know the fire chief was concerned about the width of these lanes, but.
Yep, I don't remember what he needs when he sets up, but he certainly wouldn't be setting up the ladder truck out there. But from traffic flow perspective, getting a passenger vehicle in and out of those spots, the 20-foot behind the angles of this number of degrees is comfortable.
Bless you.
And the other aisles that are perpendicular parking are 24 feet wide.
And in terms of, I didn't even look at the turning radii internally within the parking lot. Did you, are there any issues with that?
Won't get a trailer truck through there, but straight truck will go through comfortably, yeah. And the ladder truck, which has got a long overhang, you know, that's gonna come in and go right for the buildings, which is gonna be that first aisleway, if you will, in front of the buildings. And, you know, they may have to back out when they go out. They might, depending on, not sure if they can make it around there or not, quite frankly. But, I know the turning radii here weren't significantly different than the tighter radii on what we had reviewed, back before the comprehensive permit was issued.
Right.
Mr. Yeomans.
Yeah. I would just ask that you make a note, the fire department had a very specific request regarding the signage in front of the buildings, and it was on a plan. I don't see it, but it was on one of the plans. Just ask, and they were adamant that they wanted that sign there, and I think it may have dealt with the no vehicle longer than 18 feet.
Yep.
But it's on one of the earlier drafts of the, the large engineering plans.
Sure.
Where we agreed that that should be a condition that they wanted in that, and it was in the area in front of the buildings on that strip, that there can't be any, they wanted to ensure that they could get the truck through there.
Understood. I will, look at that. I figured as these are developed into those
Yeah,
construction
yeah.
plans, that's.
But I think that's right. I think it was right in front of that middle building, the middle building.
Okay.
All right, F5. So the condition read, no building permit for a building, the project shall be issued until the basin binder coated the pavement for the portion of the driveway serving that building has been installed. This is our standard language for subdivisions, Elm Rock, Providence Road, and the purpose of this is so that there's emergency vehicle access to the construction site. And I know that's a big issue for Bob Berger. So I know that you want some flexibility to not have to do the entire basin
Right,
binder.
and I think that the subsequent conditions speak to protecting about possible fires during construction and access and things like that, where we kept the language that Dan has, building permits, but for the F5, it's really simply because if they can't start construction of the buildings until, that level of pavement is in, it creates a certain significant delay. And, lenders usually like you to do as much as you can, obviously, complying with the permit. But we think that it's reasonable to do it that way. And I understand Dan's point, if it was a subdivision, it may be a different story, but since it's not, I think that's a reasonable distinction.
I guess I don't understand why it's different.
Yeah.
I mean, so we don't have base or binder, we start to build a building, we get the storm of the century again. Now we've got nothing but mud in the project area, and we can't get fire trucks in there. We can't get an ambulance in there. If somebody, fell on the job, we can't even get an ambulance in there to get, to get the person out of there. I'm not sure why we would be letting this one go.
Getting the houses leased quickly is an objective that helps financially to get, the numbers work. That's the predominantly, in the issue of the fire protection emergency access, at Flint Pond Estates, Bob had made me put these 10,000 gallon tanks in the front of the property, just in case the issue had come up and they needed to have, to deal with fire because the structure was going up. Access will always be access to the site. The site contractor must provide a means to get in and out of the property itself, especially if construction is taking place. But the idea here was that if it's going to take me 3 months, 4 months to get the roadway completed and ready for it to be used, I was hoping that I can get the structure close enough to the time that I can get an occupancy permit. The likelihood of that happening, probably, I may still need an extra month or two before I get to the stage that I can build the units totally done. The road will be done before the buildings are done. It just gives me some leeway to be able to have occupants in there a lot quicker. That's it.
So do you anticipate building all 3 buildings before?
No, one building at a time.
If we just said something along the lines of, is it safe to assume you might start with building 1, the one that's closest to Prentice Street?
I could do that. I mean, I don't see a problem. I was hoping to do the one that has the the office, but I can always have building one be the one that has the office.
I mean, you know, I guess, you know, my thinking was, you know, if it's building one or the one, whatever, I can't see it, whatever's closest to Prentice Street, at least that way, you know, you can get fire trucks and ambulances fairly close to the building.
Yes. Yeah, I have no problem with doing building one or make it specifically to that unit. And then also the hydrant would be a lot closer to the one that's on the other side of Prentice Street, you know. There's a hydrant there.
Yeah, and, I mean, yes, you know, I'm not as worried as much about fire as I am just ambulance and stuff like that. I know if I was, you know, working an ambulance and had to trudge all the way across the mud with our gear to get to somebody and,
I
you know,
understand,
because you can't get the bus in there, I mean,
I understand. I don't have a
can,
problem.
so can we just put some language along the lines of building one, you know, building one occupancy permit, but 2 and 3, it's building permit?
That seems reasonable.
Yeah,
I mean,
That would
you're
be
more-
reasonable, sure.
Yeah.
Because by that time, the driveway and the parking will be all done anyways.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Okay, let me rework this.
And I assume I'm using the right numbers, I think I am.
Yeah, one's the closest.
Okay, so just so we're clear, you can start building one without the road being constructed, but you can't start buildings 2 or 3 until you put the base and binder down,
That's fine,
right?
yes.
Okay.
And by the way, that's consistent with what we've done in other projects. I know Providence Road, we did something very similar. Fieldstone we're doing, or whatever, Elm Rock, you know,
Did we do it
they're
for
building
Flint
the
Pond?
ones out on the street.
Yeah, Flint Pond,
Was it in the Flint Pond one?
they didn't have access to hydrants and they made me put, these huge tanks.
But,
was
but,
there a
but
road?
you had base and binder though,
No,
really?
no, it was not a condition to have the basin bind. That's why the tanks were there. Bob had a concern that if somebody had to tackle the fire, because we had 4 units in the front.
Oh, well, all right, so that's another one. They were right out there by Creeper Hill.
Creeper Hill.
So that's probably why, yeah, okay.
And the water main had not been run yet, because the water main had to come from
Yep.
way down Creeper Hill.
Right, right.
And cross over, the brook, the river there, whatever
Yeah.
that is, Quinsigamon River, I think it is. Or whatever river it is next to at the base of the hill.
Yeah.
The Flint Pond
Flint Pond.
discharges from it, yeah.
Okay, but regardless, generally we've done it, and I know we've given these exceptions when these buildings are right next to some other road.
Okay. All right, so building permit will remain for F6 and F7.
Yep.
F8, this is the sidewalk condition. There was some language in here about the sidewalk had to be completed pursuant to the description in the letter from the traffic engineer, Rebecca Brown. Sotia wanted that reference stricken. I looked at the letter, it actually didn't really add anything that we didn't already have in here, so I think it was superfluous, except there was basically 2 details that were in the letter that I wanted to make sure were included, so I added those to the condition. So the substance of this condition hasn't changed, it was just wordsmithing.
Okay.
All right. Moving on. No changes to G. Section 8 is the surety provision. So under section H1A, we had language in here that no occupancy permit for a unit in any building shall be issued, and no lease of any unit shall be permitted until the base coat and the stormwater infrastructure serving the entire project has been installed. That lease language is not something we typically use, and I don't remember why that got put in. I'm not sure if we really need it.
Yeah, I mean, that seems almost a little harsh.
Yeah, I mean, it restricts the ability to
Yeah.
release, you know, for X number of months, which
Yeah.
is counterproductive for everybody. You
And
know.
we're protected by the occupancy permit
Right,
language.
that's the
Right.
key
So,
thing, so.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
all right, so we'll take that out. No changes to I, and you don't have any comments, Jeff?
No comments,
Stuff?
no.
Okay. All right, and then that gets us to the end. And we're at the waiver section. So,
So I'm looking at a waiver 10, I think it's waiver number 10. 5223, oh no, I skipped over, you have a change, to number 6.
Number 6, yeah.
Reduced, it was 20 trees being reduced to 17.
Yeah, I didn't have a chance to explain to Dan the other day. That's simply based on Bill Hannigan's calculation of, I forget what the formula was, but based on the width, the dimensions, in that area. And, you know, it is what it is, 20 versus 17, but that is what Bill calculated. I assume the formula, Jeff, is based on some, you know, size, dimensional thing.
Is he referring to the landscaping plan that you had submitted? It's not, is,
I think the description says every so many spaces you need to provide a number of trees. And what Bill did is took the calculations and he came up with the 17. So it's just a math calculation. It's nothing more than that.
and they're not actually in the middle of the parking lot, they're gonna be along the edges of the lot.
17 trees, 1 tree per 5 spaces, 17 by 5 gives you 85 spaces. I think that's where the math comes from.
Seems like we don't even need a waiver.
Even I understand that math, that's good.
I mean, I don't have my book in front of me, but if what's required is 1 tree per 5 spaces,
You know, why is there a waiver?
I think it's where they're supposed to be located. I'd have to pull the regs out, but from what I
Right.
recall, there was kind of ambiguous language as to where you had to put the trees. And so this was just to clarify that we're gonna put the trees along the edges, which I'm pretty sure there was a plan that showed.
Yeah,
Tree
and I don't
locations.
mean to make light of details, obviously the waiver is crucially important, but you will, I think Bill, Dan's right, but also you will see the final detailed landscape plan, and if there's an issue at that
Okay.
point, we'd have to deal with it.
that's fine.
And before we skip ahead, just so you all know, we did adjust some of these waiver actions in the action column to reflect the settlement. So, the separation between the buildings is now 20 feet. The parking space is now 84.
Yep.
I'm gonna go through these slowly so we don't miss anything. Number 8, we're down to 40 units. So 10,
I think that was just a typo, not really a change, Dan. Originally, you left out the N, or I did. I
Okay,
don't know if
yep,
I don't know who typed it, but I don't think that's a substantive change.
okay.
Dan, 11 was, I saw like, it was reduced from 1,000 to 500, but now it's like granted to allow the project to be constructed as shown on the revised site plan.
Right, we felt, I think jointly, that there was no need to do an arithmetical calculation, because the important thing is you've approved the number of units and how it fits. So that's why we just thought it was more direct to say, you know, allowed as shown on the plan, the revised plans.
That's right. Okay, the wetland, regulations weren't changed in terms of waivers. Stormwater, I believe these are all the same as what we allowed before or denied. Planning board subdivision regs. That angled parking aisle is reflected in that action column in number 2.
question, is your wetland, all of that has gone through conservation?
No, not
No,
yet.
it hasn't, okay.
And then the next one is the Grafton Sewer Pump Station Policy. That's withdrawn because it's no longer a pump station. Water connection fee request has been withdrawn. The sewer connection fees, so that's a change from the language before. So we're saying now that the sewer connection fees will be as stated in that column. And that's been reviewed and accepted by the sewer commission.
Yep.
I have a question on that. Are you saying the fee for the 14-unit buildings shall be 37.5, and the 12-unit building shall be 32.5? Does that mean that the two buildings are at 37.5, or is that?
Actually, a good point. That should say each.
Each.
Yeah, because of the plural, we understood it and we agree that it is per building
Yep.
for the 14 units.
No, but that's a very good point. That's,
You're gonna add the word each?
Yeah.
Or something along those lines?
Per building.
Yeah, per building.
Okay, so you're gonna add each on that,
per building.
Per building.
per building, okay.
All right,
So, yeah.
I think that's it.
Awesome.
I mean, I actually emailed you the final decision, should have Carl's name removed and
Right.
Ryan's name. So what do we need to do now?
Well, I have a couple of things to do.
Gotta get over this.
You can go
Yeah.
over that.
So, although a lot has been accomplished and achieved in terms of some of the contingencies that were part of the settlement agreement itself, there's still a little bit of a chicken and egg in one thing, but the settlement agreement that I had drafted, summarized briefly what now has been approved in much greater detail. But it basically, we still feel the need that we should also enter into a settlement agreement, which briefly repeats some of the things that are in this decision. But in terms of contingencies, here's the scoop. He has, which I think you know, I sent Dan a copy of the, and maybe I copied Katrina, but the special permit from the planning board for that 34 Elm Street has been granted and has passed the appeal period. So that's okay. So in what I've just chicken scratched in, I'll give it to you when we're done. But it's pretty easy to, to understand if I speak slowly. The remaining contingencies are that the Grafton Board of Health issues an extension of 2 years for the time within which the property at 34 Elm must be connected to the sewer.
Yeah, just stop right. I have spoken with the agent of the Board of Health, and I had held it back from submitting it until I got to this stage. So tomorrow morning, one of the things I'm gonna do is leave the form with the Board of Health, which she said they granted it, it shouldn't have to anticipate any problems. So that's what I'm gonna be doing tomorrow morning with that.
And then the only other contingency, B in this handwritten draft, and Prentice Place or related party, this is a contingency, acquiring title to the property at 34 Elm Street. So it's a chicken and egg, because he still has it under control. He has a contract that's binding on the seller, but it's chicken and egg in the sense that he couldn't have bought it until now we know that, we have this agreement. On the slim outside chance that some catastrophe happens, I suppose theoretically to the building, but, the seller reneges or God knows what, incredibly unlikely. So, Dan, we still need a settlement agreement. Again, the only contingencies are, although the process, this will be voted, you already voted to approve the settlement, basically, the new plans. Presumably, having gone through this, you'll vote to, approve this decision with the final draft things that Dan will take care of. Then, I would want you to vote to approve the settlement agreement, because we have to say that this settlement agreement and all this is signed and, by attorneys as appropriate and by the board, delivered to me to be held in escrow until he closes, and he'll try to close as soon as possible. And then the final step is the Housing Appeals Committee part, the agreement and stipulation for entry of judgment, which is just for the lawyers to sign. It simply briefly recites the history and says the parties, the board and the applicant, have agreed on this modified decision, and it's attached to that, and HAC will approve it. We're willing to do that so that there's certainty without getting into a chicken and egg in terms of theoretically an appeal from HAC. So the only thing that we still need in terms of chicken and egg is to have this all done, have me hold it, hopefully for only a few weeks. I put in here 60 days, but hopefully only a few weeks you'll close,
Yeah.
and then I deliver everything to HAC.
I've already started the process with the lender. They tell me within 4 weeks to 5 weeks, they should be ready to have the property taken care of.
So you, when you say the property, you 34 Elm,
Correct.
you're borrowing to buy that?
Yeah, partially, yes.
Okay. I don't think you need I don't think we need a settlement agreement here, and I'll tell you why. And it's not because I'm trying to
No, I think
use
we're all
leverage.
trying
I
to
just,
get to yes, we're virtually at yes, so I.
yeah, I don't think we need it, because I think basically what you're saying is you're gonna get the Board of Health approval.
Yeah,
That's
I don't
gonna,
think
you're gonna know that
Yeah,
very soon.
yeah,
yeah.
The only other contingency is closing on the house, but you have an agreement binding that they have to sell it to you.
Yeah.
And if they don't, then you sue them for specific performance and you get them to sell it. And so I think what we can do is just report to the Housing Appeals Committee that we have a final decision that's been agreed to and voted on by the board. And if for some reason that falls through with the house, then we go back to where we were before this, and we'll have to revisit it. But I don't see the need for
I
an agreement.
agree that that's what would happen, but how, and it's not distrust, believe me, we're all past that, and I appreciate it, mean it sincerely. But, you know, mechanically or logistically and legally, if there's all these papers are signed and, you know, I submit them to HAC, how do we go back and basically, from our viewpoint, require you to accept the fact that that agreement, as much as we work so hard at it, it's all dead, and we have to go back to HAC on an appeal? That's all, I mean, it's just logistical.
I think the board understands that all of this was riding on Elm Street. I don't, there's no illusions that that wasn't the case, so
Yeah, I just
we
don't want-
expected you to close, and
I
you will
understand.
close, and if you don't close because of no fault of your own, if you don't close because someone else did something illegal, then I think we all understand that we have to revisit this and have another discussion about it.
Yeah,
I mean,
I just
we
don't-
can't,
Yeah, I
Are
just
you
don't
okay
wanna
with that not being in a written agreement? And, you know, I would ask that it would be part of a motion.
but what does this get, what does that settlement agreement get you that you don't already have? I don't think you get anything more.
Just what you verbally described, just guarantee that you understand and that we don't have to, you know, fight City Hall, no pun intended, to be able to reactivate HAC, that's all.
But we're already agreeing that we're not gonna submit this to the HAC until you close. I think,
Oh, I thought that's what I'm asking you to agree to. If you agree to that, then that accomplishes
yeah,
it.
why,
Yeah, yeah, that's
yeah,
fine.
that's
If
fine
you
with
agree
us.
to that, yeah.
sure,
And you just don't think that you need.
it's already stayed. The HAC appeal stayed.
Right.
We just keep
Oh, if
staying
you
it.
agree to
until you-
that as part of the motion that we won't submit it until you close,
Yeah,
that's
then
to
there's
me
no
the same,
initial-
that's the same as what I was trying to accomplish.
That's what I was,
I'm sorry, if I was obtuse, I apologize.
No.
As long as it's of record, that's fine.
is that, I mean, I'm
Yeah.
assuming everyone is,
Makes sense, yeah.
right,
I-
the appeal just keeps
just so
getting
you know.
stayed until,
Yeah,
You know, and I think we agree on this, once it's all, you know, revised the final way, everything will be signed. It's just that Dan and I will hold it and it won't go to HAC until he closes. Yeah. okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's fine. I'm sorry,
Just so that you know, I'm not concerned about the financing part of it. I'm concerned more of the property owner. I do have an agreement, but until I actually close, who knows?
No, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
we know.
so then, yeah, then that does it.
So, do we need to take an action tonight?
yeah, I would recommend that you vote to accept the draft modified decision, subject to the changes we just discussed tonight. This is a vote. I'll revise this, circulate the new draft, make sure Peter's in agreement, circulate it to you guys, and then you all can just come in during the day and sign it with Katrina. If that works for you. Unless you want to do
But
another.
Peter actually wanted something else added to the motion that I've already forgotten.
Just what Dan verbalized.
We don't need it.
We don't need it.
No, you need, well, I think you should vote to, you know, approve, just as Dan.
Approve as amended, approve the draft decision
And then a
as
vote-
amended.
And then a vote that it's understood that, the modified decision along with the pleading that we've agreed on to go to HAC will be held until he closes on the unit.
So, motion to approve the decision as amended to be held
Until closing on.
until closing at 34 Elm Street, until the
Additional
applicant.
stipulation.
At which point will be submitted to the Housing Appeals Committee as a joint motion to accept a decision by stipulation.
I mean,
Did you get all that, Katrina?
in the settlement
I got
agreement.
some video though too.
That's what I was thinking.
If it were in a settlement agreement, I built in a time frame. So, you know, I think doing it this way, you guys just have to understand that if in 60 days or 90 days or something, you may have to come back and say, you know, I was never able to close.
Yeah.
So I'm not worried about including that detail in
Right.
this motion, but I just want you guys to be aware of that, you know, because he can't be held
Let's
hostage.
run that lettering, or the motion by us again, so you have it. You have it?
I have most of it. Vote to accept the draft modified decision and the pleading,
As amended.
as amended.
With a further stipulation that,
And to be held until the closing on 34 Elm Street, then the decision will be sent to HAT.
sounds good.
It's a little less legalese, but
Close enough.
Much plainer, yeah.
So moved.
Is that right?
in layman's
Good job.
terms, sounds
That's
good.
better than I
I've got
would've
the
done.
video. I can go back if you want it more detailed, but
Well, that's right.
Well, that's
You
good.
can
That
watch the
covers it.
video.
All right, so, somebody could say so moved.
So moved. I just said that.
Second.
Thank you. All right, so motion made and seconded. Any discussion? I mean, I feel
Yeah.
good about how this all went. It, you know, occurred to me, and it actually occurred to me in executive session, and it's probably too late now, but should we have included like Tim or?
Tim knew the meeting was tonight?
Oh, we did?
Well,
I-
they all
Perfect.
knew.
I copied him on the email I sent to you all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
the new town planner knew it all as well, I think.
Okay, perfect.
He was copied on it, right?
Not on my email, but
No, not on his
Yeah.
email.
But he hasn't really been part of it, but, you know, the Board of Selectmen and just so everyone understands, I mean, the Board of Selectmen, and the town administrator were part of the mediation team. And, you know, of course, they were actually in, when this was presented, they were in the meeting, or certainly Jen was. So they're aware of this, so I think we're good. All right, so, motion made and seconded. Any other discussion or comments? Then we'll vote. Mr. Waller?
Yes.
Mr. Yeomans?
Yes.
Ms. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. So, I think we're good there.
Thank you.
You'll have,
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
you'll have that scoop in the ground before you know it.
So, before we get to Elm Rock, there is one piece of, new business, and it may be putting Satira a little bit on the spot, but I want to report on, I participated in a development team meeting this week. Was it last week? Yeah, I think it was last week, whenever it was. And basically it was discussing Fisherville Terrace, which is the 40B behind St. James
Right.
Church.
Yep.
And actually, I just want everyone to understand, so Tier actually approached the development team about purchasing that from John Winslow. And I think Satir was mainly looking to kind of feel out how the development team felt about it. And there's one significant change that he's proposing, and that is to convert a portion of that to apartments, possibly on the order of somewhere between 100 and 200 apartments, instead of the 72 or 76 or whatever his houses that are proposed for that right now. So, you know, it's very early in the process. I know that Satir is still, you know, very early in talking, but I want to make sure that the board is aware that I participated in that meeting and that was presented. And I don't know if Satir wants to add anything at this point, but I will say it's very early in the process and he may have absolutely nothing more to say than what I've just said.
All I can say is that I have a meeting scheduled to meet with John and talk to see what options are available. And I know the process most likely will involve making a new submission for an amendment to the existing plan, which will be considered a substantial change and open up the hearing all over again. And I don't know how John will be receptive to doing that, and that's the reason why my meeting is on the 18th of February. And we've got to work the logistics of that. But it's very premature. I mean, I have other things that I have to put a priority. This is not a priority for me right now. But nevertheless, you know, I'd like to know what options there are and what can be done with that piece of property.
Been going on 10 years, so a couple more
I
months.
think, what did you say, 30 years?
You know, don't ask me how, but it was a lot more than 10 years. I believe it was the very first 40B project I ever worked on.
I think they should keep
the
the
80s.
property that they can.
Don't ask me how, but I believe that's the case, so.
Yeah, I know that property, it was a 40B that then lapsed, nothing ever got developed, and it was about 10 years ago that Winslow came
Right,
to us.
Exactly.
Started it all over again.
That's right.
Do you-
took it over from the original partners and, you know. and
Do you have
it's
any
still been
sense of continuing it as single family, or?
No, it has to be rental because you need the density to pay for the extensive site development cost. That site is more expensive to develop than Flint Pond Estates. So the numbers just don't work for me. I don't know how to, because the market, I already know what it's in the South Grafton area. The homes at Craftsman Village, they're ranging between $350,000 and $400,000. At that value, which I assume that would be the market, it's very hard to make the numbers work. So having a rental component may allow the numbers to be more in line to what can be done with that piece of property.
Have you sold all of those in Craftsman
I
Village?
have 4 left.
4 left.
4 left, yeah.
That looks good, by the way. I compliment you on it. Looks
It will look better when it's all finished.
No, it looks good.
But thank you.
Yeah, and, you know, to Satir's point about the, you know, the numbers, obviously, you know, John Winslow hasn't been able to make the numbers work either, right? So, I mean, when we first issued this 10 years ago, it was coming out of the Great Recession and all, and you just kind of accept him as word that, you know, money's tight, blah, 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 but, you know, we're into many years into a very strong recovery, and he still hasn't been able to do it. So, you know, I think it's pretty clear that what we approved probably isn't really feasible, you know, or somebody would have done it by now. You know, so I think what Satir basically is taking a fresh look at it and, hey, to develop this thing, this is what we need to do, and that's what he's pursuing.
Is that due to the stormwater?
No, it has to do with the site. It's a hill full of ledge, and you got about 12 to 1,400 linear feet of roadway before you do any building construction. That's a big chunk, you know.
There's
Tremendous.
pretty extensive stormwater stuff.
Yeah, also
Too.
coming down that hill and then into Main Street, that all adds, that all.
Everything coming down from Sutton.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
tremendous,
that's right.
tremendous amount of earthwork, a lot of earth to be redistributed on the site to make it happen. Ledge to be blasted, absolutely. The stormwater management system in itself is not overly complicated. I think it's more the earthwork that's driving it than anything else.
Are you considering it all a combination of rental and, or would you be considering rental and freestanding? And the reason I bring that up, the freestanding.
That was the idea,
Okay.
Bill, because when you do rentals, it's a different owner from the condos, which is the association. So that too has to be worked out, trying to figure out what exactly we need to do, what part of the land is gonna be for rentals, which will be for sale. So there's a lot of planning before you get to the stage to make a submission. That's why it's very premature right now.
And normally, you know, I would report this without Satir in the room, so I don't want too many more questions and drilling down into the detail beyond what I know and was discussed. So, you know, I don't want to put Satir too much more on the spot, any more than he wants to be. You know, but, you know, what was presented to the development team was a combination of rental and home ownership. But it's all extremely preliminary.
Just so that, I also want to make perfectly clear, I worked on this Prentice Place project for quite a few years. This is my priority. That is the last thing in my list of things that I have to worry about, if I ever get to it, you know. So I don't want you to think that I'll be here next month. It might be
Yeah,
a year
please.
from
5
now or
years
2
from
years
now.
from now, you know.
They need a break.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you wanna do this again
Nice guy.
soon? Holy smokes.
But thank you very much. I really appreciate your help.
Nice to see you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night. All right, next order of business is Elm Rock Estates, I believe.
Yes, looks like. Yay. Finally.
Yes, and we're signing the Mylars tonight.
Good evening.
Well, hello.
Good evening.
See you all.
Probably on his Instagram and his Facebook page.
Oh, my emails, I tried to.
Your emails, you're all caught up.
Put
Talk
some
to all your
things in the
friends.
shopping cart that
There you go.
Your shopping cart. Amazon filled up.
was the relaxing part of my day, to be honest. Bruins are up 2-1.
look so good.
Why are you here?
Okay, good evening.
Thanks for the update.
Steve O'Connell from Turning Point Engineering. So we're pursuant to the comprehensive permit for Elm Rock Estates, we're really just trying to avoid a fire drill as we approach closings, occupancy permits. So we have completed and executed tri-party agreements for the roadway and infrastructure bond. We used the numbers that were provided by Jeff, his latest numbers. We made the presumption in the preparation of these documents that you would accept his numbers. If you don't, we'll have to come back with, re-executed documents, but, so the figure was $599,000. We have execution from the developer and from our bank, Rockland Trust. And we just, we would just require endorsement of the board and then under the supervision of a notary.
Okay, so this is essentially the surety for the project. Graves Engineering, Jeff Walsh, has determined that the amount that we should have on surety is $599,000 per his letter here of January 15th. And you've got the actual documents there reflecting that amount. Dan, have you seen these? Have you reviewed these? Yeah, okay.
Dan and Attorney Netburn went back and forth. These were the forms that Dan.
Yeah, the tri-party agreement is what I drafted.
Yep,
Kathy
okay.
Nepburn reviewed it and we're in agreement.
Okay, so really, do we actually need to take action, or do we just sign these things?
You have to probably vote on it, because you've voted on it in the past,
Yeah.
and then sign it.
Vote to accept the bond amount. I think by that action you could execute, but whatever your pleasure.
Do we have a copy of that, Katrina? You do?
Yeah.
Okay, good enough. So I think what I'll do is accept the tri-party agreement
So are those the ones that are signed by
as
the bank?
submitted.
Yep,
Okay,
and Chad.
okay, and then these guys can sign and I can notarize their signatures.
And somewhere in here is the number 599 or whatever it is.
It's on the second page.
Is it?
Oh, no, that's the,
Yeah, it's on the second
Second page
page,
of
number
the-
3.
I'm not
This,
sure.
not on
not
that.
on that.
The one that I
It's on
initially-
Not on
this.
that, it's on this one, this is the one that
Yeah,
should sign today.
yeah, I think the
Okay.
original one I sent you, Katrina, was before.
Before the
Dan.
numbers got put in, and Dan and Kathy, yeah.
All right, so we can send that back. All right, so I'd entertain a motion to accept the tri-party agreement for Wheel Rock Estates as submitted in the amount of $599,000.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion. Mr. Waller? How do you vote? Mr. Yeomans?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.
Ms. Reed?
Yes.
Chairman votes yes. And then we need to sign that and Katrina notarizes, is that the deal?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep, and
Can you date this too?
Yep, I'll get all of them right now.
Hey, how many houses have they sold in there? You know?
got about
a few.
7 or 8 under agreement. We've got a couple of closings coming up early April.
We've got up to,
I haven't been by there lately. Have they built any? They had the ones on the street.
Yep, they're framing 3 inside
Nice.
subdivision,
Yeah.
and everyone wants the ones at the end, but we're just
Yeah.
not yet, because then you're hopping all over the place, making a mess, and work our way in.
Yep. Nice.
Yeah.
Weather's been cooperating for you?
Yeah, very.
they just dropped out 5 more.
November was the worst
Had
month
plans.
for us.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Only downside to a warm winter is mud, but we haven't had the precipitation to really cause the mud to keep knocking out.
I'm unbelievable these things balance out, so watch out.
Oh yeah,
Oh, yeah, we're gonna get
February and
slammed.
March are gonna get.
yeah. Love the law of averages, right?
We'll be skiing
So
well
each of
into
you need
April.
to sign.
Exactly.
I don't know. How,
We're just on the top here?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to start with Bill or
Bill, and yeah, and we'll go, yeah. How many are we signing?
3.
All right, so,
Stamp and notarize.
and I think that's all we need to cover tonight, right? Is,
This, and then he brought, remember the Mylars that?
oh, the Mylars.
That we
Okay.
never signed because you wanted Jeff's final blessing? Jeff approved them.
Blessed them?
Okay.
So long ago, I'm not remembering.
That was a long.
Thank you.
Pull up the
You're
email.
welcome.
Thank you. Oh, that one where that was the,
Yeah.
I was thinking the full plan set.
No, where we had to change the back
That-
on the 3 lots?
That's right. Basically, if I remember right, the back of the 3 lots, the lot line basically follows what was the easement line before. It creates that separate parcel.
Reduce the parcel, open space parcel area, and it's gonna be conveyed to the Grafton Land Trust in fee.
Do they sit around that on 3 sides or just on the 2 sides, Steve?
Did this require an amendment though, the permit?
They voted it in significance,
We did this?
yes.
Yeah.
More or less 3 sides, but, cause it's not really, but yeah, this, here, and then up the side.
Oh, okay, but not where your hand is now. Okay.
And Dan, the only reason I remember that we
Yep.
did it is we
okay.
just reviewed it in the minutes.
Oh,
It's a signature.
And then I'll stamp it.
Look at your little notary case.
Notary suitcase.
Looks like a, comes
I
out of a spine
know,
museum.
I know, I know. I
One
was gonna ask you, what is this?
Uh,
Okay, you know what?
Katrina,
I ordered it, so.
Do you want these confidential to dispose of them? I don't think.
Yeah, don't put them in here, give them
Yeah.
to me.
Yeah, I've got a bunch here.
You have it?
Just give me the whole
Throw
pack
them in
back. Don't put them in there.
Yeah, don't put the
Don't
confidentials
put the
in there.
confidential in there. I'll take them.
Well, the,
you want all
the
of this?
decision, the
And the
draft
ex-
decision can go.
draft
with it.
Executive
decision-
session
The
minutes.
draft
Right.
decision you can keep, the other, this
This
one,
stuff
I
you need. Okay.
All right, we'll do two.
In the executive session
This is
minutes.
all,
That's all gotta be ground up.
this is all
Yeah, they're all here.
This does not need to be ground up.
recycle, I mean,
I'll take care of it.
this is,
Oh, and then the 5 of you that need to sign up there, use these pens.
This you need, right?
Okay,
Yeah,
leave that on. So I think at this time I entertain a motion to adjourn.
And John, when was that?
that'd be great. So moved, second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed?